Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, please hit that sub button and join the family. We're so close to 30,000 subs, and you can make that possible. Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's stories.
Disclaimer on reading materials. The stories are carefully crafted, altered, and embellished by our team. This is to abide by YouTube's policies on reading materials. We hold sole intellectual rights to these stories as original content. I matched with Leo on a rainy Wednesday night while scrolling Tinder and half watching an old sitcom rerun. His profile pic was him in a suit, standing in front of what looked like a courthouse, but not in a pretentious way. The bio was witty but not trying too hard. Something like I argue for a living but I'm great at listening to. I thought that was cute. We started chatting that night and hit it off quickly. He wasn't one of those guys who took 6 hours to reply or sent cryptic one-word answers. He asked good questions and remembered the little things. We met up for coffee first. It was chill. Leo was funny and surprisingly relaxed for someone whose job probably involved yelling in courtrooms. We talked about our favorite trashy TV shows and swapped awful first date stories. He was quick with his jokes but didn't come off like he was trying to win a crowd. Just really easy to talk to. A few days later, he took me to this Korean barbecue place downtown that was always packed, and somehow he had a reservation. I was lucky impressed. Over dinner, he talked about his job more and mentioned he couldn't say much about his cases. Confidentiality stuff, he said. Made sense. I didn't think much of it. Over the next couple of weeks, we hung out more. Dinner at his place, long walks where we just ran about work and life, occasional sleepovers where nothing crazy happened, just long talks and bad movies. He was thoughtful. He'd remember if I said I had a big meeting coming up and send a good luck text that morning. Stuff like that. But then one night, like maybe our 5th or 6th real date, he seemed off. We were on his couch, splitting a bottle of wine, and he just got quiet. Not in a distant way. More like he had something to say but didn't know how to start. I figured maybe something at work was bugging him. He said he wanted to tell me something personal, and of course I was like, yeah, go for it. We weren't official or anything, but we'd been seeing each other enough that a little real talk made sense. So he tells me, and not like dramatically, more like he was testing how I'd react, that he's been defending a guy in this really dark case, a man accused of some seriously disturbing stuff. The kind that makes headlines, that people repost with captions like "lock him up forever." And Leo wasn't just assigned to the case. He took it willingly, said he believed everyone deserves a fair shot in court, which, okay, I'd get in theory. I asked if the guy was guilty. Leo just kind of paused and said, "It's complicated." I sat there not really knowing how to respond. I wasn't expecting some open and shut situation, but the way he said it made my stomach twist a little. It wasn't just about doing his job. He told me he thought the man he was defending wasn't inherently bad, that people can do horrible things and still deserve empathy. I mean, sure, but like, there's a line, right? Leo didn't seem to think so. He started talking more openly about it over the next week or two. Like, once the seal was broken, he didn't feel like he had to hold it in anymore. He'd say things like, "It's wild how fast people turn on someone," or "He just made a mistake." I didn't push for details because, honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But he seemed almost too comfortable defending this guy's actions, like he was justifying them to himself, or maybe trying to convince me to see it the same way. That part started to freak me out. One night, we were walking through the park after dinner, and he said something that still stuck in my head. He said, if people actually listened to the full story, they'd understand why he did what he did. And the way he said it, like it wasn't about the law anymore, but about sympathy. I don't know. It gave me this weird feeling like he wasn't separating himself from the case anymore. By that point, I'd already started pulling back a bit. I made excuses to not hang out, stopped answering texts right away. It wasn't that Leo had done anything directly wrong to me, but being around him started to feel heavy. Like I couldn't unhear the way he spoke about that guy. Like he was defending more than just a client. He was defending the idea that awful things didn't really matter as long as you understood the person behind them. I stopped seeing him after that. I didn't ghost him or anything. I just told him I needed space. He said he understood. Didn't argue. He just sent me a text saying he appreciated the honesty and that he hoped I wouldn't judge him for doing his job. I didn't reply. I wasn't sure what to even say. A few weeks later, I read his name in an article about the case. It was a short mention, just said the defendant's lawyer was Leo Simmons. The article was brutal, that laid out the charges in full detail. I won't get into it here, but let's just say it confirmed what I'd already started to suspect. This wasn't some misunderstood guy who needed a second chance. This was someone who hurt people in a way you don't come back from. Sometimes I wonder if Leo really believed what he said, or if defending people like that had just numbed him to it. Maybe that's what happens when your whole job is about arguing the side no one wants to hear. Still, I think about those nights on the couch, how calm he looked talking about it, like none of it touched him. That part still weirds me out the most. I haven't been on Tinder in a while. Every time I open it, I think of that first message from Leo and how easy it was to like him, how normal everything felt in the beginning. Because sometimes the creepiest stuff doesn't look creepy at all until you're already in it. So this whole thing started because I was sick of going to bars and hoping I'd bump into someone cool. I figured if I was gonna meet weirdos, at least let me do it from my couch with some snacks in hand. Tinder seemed easy enough. Mindless swiping, random bios, people who said things like looking for my player too, or let's lie about how we met. I was bored and not expecting anything. Honestly, I was just curious to see what was out there. That's my match with Katie. She was one of those girls who looked like she had her life together in a really put together but effortless kind of way. Her pics were all bright colors and cool angles. Her at a bookstore, her laughing over drinks, one with a film camera slung over her shoulder. She had a little line in her bio that said, "Love people watching, hate cilantro." And I don't know why, but I thought that was funny. She messaged me first, which I liked. She was quick, smart, and had this super dry sense of humor that I got hooked on fast. Our first date was at this spot that was kind of artsy but not too pretentious. You know, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and drinks with rosemary in them. She showed up wearing this giant denim jacket and boots that looked expensive, but beat up in a cool way. I don't even remember what we talked about, honestly. Something about old cartoons and why public bathrooms are always freezing. It was fun. She laughed at my stories, called me out when I tried to humble brag, and made some joke about me looking like I played bass in a failed college band, which weirdly wasn't far off. We hung out a few more times after that, always for choosing the spot. One time we got noodles and sat in this tiny booth where our knees kept bumping. Another time she wanted to wander and see where we end up. So we ended up eating gas station candy in a park and rating strangers' outfits. I thought she was just cool like that, random and curious and always kind of watching the world like it was a movie. I liked that. She made things feel like a story. There was one weird thing, though. Every time we met up, she took a lot of photos. Not of me directly, at least not obviously, but always of the space or her drink or something random. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone's glued to their phones now. I figured she was into photography or something. She carried that film camera everywhere, and I assumed that meant she was just into documenting life or whatever. I even joked once that she probably had a secret Instagram for rating coffee foam art. She just smirked and said, "You're not that far off." I don't know exactly when I started noticing the pattern, but by the fourth or fifth date, something started to feel off. It was always the same kind of vibe, cool location, casual atmosphere, her being a little distant but still engaged enough to keep me talking. She'd ask really specific questions too. Stuff like, "What's your biggest insecurity?" Or "Do you think people can really change?" I thought she was just deep or maybe one of those emotional intellect types, so I answered. Opened up, even. I was weirdly comfortable around her. Then one night I was scrolling Instagram while half watching some Netflix doc I wasn't really into, and I landed on this account someone had sent me weeks ago. It was called Worst Men in the City. I hadn't really looked at it before, just assumed it was memes or something. But I clicked through out of boredom and suddenly froze. There I was. Like full on. Sitting at that ramen shop, noodled halfway in my mouth. She hadn't even asked me to pose. It was the same exact table, same shirt, same posture. I read the caption twice because my brain didn't register it the first time. It said something like, "This one said he didn't believe in therapy but gives great advice. Also ordered for me without asking. 6 3/10, bonus points for good hair." I felt my stomach drop. Hard. I kept scrolling. There were more photos. None of them tagged, of course, but you could tell they were all dates. Guys sitting across from her, looking distracted or awkward or overly confident. Each one had a caption that sounded funny on the surface, but was actually pretty brutal when you thought about it. Like she was roasting them to an invisible crowd. Stuff about bad manners, weird compliments, cringe opinions, dumb quotes they probably thought were charming. And her followers ate it up. Thousands of likes. Tons of comments like "girl, I could never," and "he looks exactly like someone who says, I'm not like other guys." It was like public execution, but with trendy filters. I scrolled back up and stared at my own post again. My face was a little blurry, but it was definitely me. I remembered exactly what I said about therapy, too, and how she'd smiled at me like she was into the conversation, like she got it. And now I was this punchline on a curated feed of bad dates, ranked and labeled and out there for anyone to laugh at. I didn't confront her. I probably should have. But something about it made me feel weirdly small. I had walked into a trap and didn't even notice until the door locked behind me. I felt gross, not just because she posted the photo, but because I'd shared stuff with her thinking it was mutual. Thought we were vibing. Meanwhile, I was just giving her content. I had matched her that night and blocked her number. Not in an angry way, more like in a get this out of my life kind of way. I didn't say anything. I figured anything I said would just end up being more material. Some guy who couldn't take a joke or blew it out of proportion. Maybe I was. I don't know. A few weeks later, I checked the account again. Even though I told myself I wouldn't, she was still at it. New guys, new photos, new jokes. The whole thing made me want to delete Tinder entirely. Not because I thought everyone was doing it, but because I suddenly felt like none of it was real. Like every conversation could be a setup. Every smile could end up in a caption with laughing emojis under it. I haven't dated since then. Not because I'm bitter, just cautious, I guess. And yeah, I get it. It's the internet. People turn their lives into content all the time. But being turned into someone else's punchline without even knowing, that's a different kind of weird. A different kind of messed up. The thing is, I wasn't even trying to date when I matched with Mark. I was just scrolling out of habit. Like, when you're waiting for your food to heat up and you've already checked every other app 5 times. That kind of scrolling. I wasn't looking for anything really. I'd just gotten out of something kind of lame that fizzled out after 2 months of seeing where it goes. I was tired of trying to guess what people wanted, so I wasn't expecting anything decent to come out of it. Mark stood out because he had this goofy, crooked smile and an old photo of him trying to feed a goat with a granola bar. I'm not making that up. His bio just said something dumb like professional snack enthusiast, amateur furniture builder, and I laughed harder than I should have. He messaged first, which I appreciated, and our convo was low pressure. He didn't send weird emojis or ask for my number right away, and we talked about things like which cereal mascot would win in a fight. Dumb stuff that made it feel casual. We met up the next weekend at this tiny pizza spot that only has 3 tables and always smells like burnt garlic. Mark showed up with paint smudges on his hoodie and admitted he'd just come from helping a friend fix a bookshelf. He was tall, kind of scruffy, and gave off this steady, comfortable vibe, like the human version of background music you actually like. We split a weird pizza with peers on it and stayed till closing. He made fun of my taste in movies and I mocked his ringtone. It was fun. So we kept seeing each other. No drama, no games. He texted when he said he would. Didn't leave me hanging, didn't act weird about splitting the bill or walking me home. He came over to my place once and helped me repot this sad plant I'd almost given up on. Just a solid, easygoing guy. He told me he was divorced, but it didn't seem like a big thing when he mentioned it. He said they'd ended things on decent terms and were better as friends, and that he'd been single for about a year. Cool, whatever. Lots of people are divorced, not a red flag. The first weird moment was when I asked him to come to this birthday thing for my friend's cousin. Not a big event, just a backyard barbecue with beer and too many folding chairs. He said he couldn't make it because he had family stuff, which didn't seem odd until I noticed he looked uncomfortable saying it. Like he was dodging something. I didn't push it. I figured maybe he just wasn't ready for friend introductions or hated group things. But it stayed in my head. A few days later, I ended up near his neighborhood and texted to see if he wanted to grab a late lunch. He said sure and sent me an address that wasn't the one he originally told me he lived at. I asked about it and he brushed it off with something like, "Oh yeah, I moved in with a friend temporarily while my lease is getting sorted." Again, I let it go. People move around, no big deal. Except when I showed up, a woman opened the door. She was maybe a couple years older than me, wearing leggings and holding a basket of laundry. She looked confused, but not alarmed. I asked if Mark was home, and she just stared at me for a second before calling out, "Mark, it's someone for you." I knew something was off immediately. He came to the door looking like someone who just got caught sneaking out of a movie theater. He smiled, said hi like nothing was weird, and invited me in. I followed him to the kitchen and asked quietly who the woman was. He mumbled, "My ex-wife." I just stood there like, "What? She lived here? With you?" He explained, while dumping chips into a bowl like we were having a totally normal conversation, that yeah, he still lived with her, but not in a romantic way. It was just for the kid, he said. I blinked so hard my contact almost fell out. Kid? What kid? That's when I realized I'd never heard him mention a child. Not once. Not even in passing. He told me they had a 7-year-old daughter, and that they decided it was best to live together to co-parent her under one roof. Not for financial reasons or because they couldn't find other options. They just thought it would be healthier for the kid, and they had clear boundaries and slept in separate rooms. I didn't even know what to say. I just kind of stood there awkwardly while he offered me a soda. I said no and asked why he hadn't told me any of this. He said he didn't want to scare me off before I got to know him. That it's hard enough to date as a divorced dad without dropping that I still live with my ex-wife right away. Look, I get that dating with a kid and an ex is complicated, I really do. But hiding that for a month and then springing on me like I should just roll with it, that didn't sit right. I sat there trying to imagine myself coming over for dinner and hanging out with his ex and their daughter like it was some quirky sitcom. I couldn't picture it. After that day, I pulled back. I told him I needed space to think, and he said he understood. He was always understanding, honestly, never pushy or defensive. That almost made it harder, because I didn't hate him. He didn't treat me badly. He just left out a massive part of his life like it was a footnote. I thought about messaging him again a couple times after that. Wondered if maybe I'd overreacted or if I could get used to the idea. But every time I pictured that house with him, his ex, and their kid all under one roof, I just felt like I'd always be the extra, the outsider, the temporary visitor who didn't really belong there. So I let it fade. He didn't chase me down or send dramatic texts, just a quiet "I hope you're good" a week later, which I never answered. Looking back, I think the weirdest part was how normal it all felt right up until it didn't. Like I've been watching a movie with the wrong subtitles the whole time. Everything lined up on the surface, but I'd missed the actual plot completely. I still pass that pizza place sometimes and think about how relaxed I felt that night. How I thought I'd finally met someone low maintenance and solid. I guess I did. He just forgot to mention the wife, the kid, and the fact that he was basically living a whole second life on top of ours. This one still pisses me off when I think about it. It started on a Sunday night. I was in bed too early, overthinking work stuff, trying to avoid doom scrolling. I opened Tinder mostly out of habit. I wasn't even looking for anything serious at the time, just something to break up the routine, maybe a few dates, some decent convos. I didn't expect anything to actually stick. But then I matched with Nicole. She didn't look like anyone else I'd dated before. Not the usual overly filtered selfies or bikini vacation shots. Her pictures were simple, just her smiling in a hoodie, one blurry concert photo, and a weird close-up of a cappuccino with her nails in the background. Her bio said something like, "Ask me what my go-to sandwich is." So I did. Her answer was chaotic, meatballs and crushed up chips on sourdough. But it made me laugh, and from there we just didn't stop texting. We moved fast, not in a red flag way, just easy. The conversations were good, like actually good. She didn't do the thing where every message feels like an interview question. She was quick-witted, said what she was thinking without sugarcoating it, and always had some random fact or opinion that pulled me in. Within a week, we had plans to meet up. I was looking forward to it way more than I wanted to admit. Our first date was at this tiny place that only served dumplings and tea. She picked it, and when I showed up, she was already sitting by the window scribbling in a notebook. She waved me over and apologized for writing something down before she forgot it, which felt kind of endearing. We ordered too much food and spent 2 hours trading stories about the worst advice we'd ever gotten. Hers was that if you smile more, men will like you. I said mine was don't text back too fast. It shows weakness. She laughed at all the right things, nodded when I talked about my sister moving away, and made me feel like I was really being listened to. Honestly, it was one of the best dates I've been on in a long time. So we kept going. Second date was drinks. Third was a walk through this weird pop-up market downtown. The fourth was at her place. We watched a terrible rom-com she insisted was so bad it's good, and she made popcorn with way too much salt. I started to let my guard down, which doesn't usually happen that fast for me. I told her things I didn't usually say early on. Personal stuff, family stuff, even stuff I didn't tell my last actual girlfriend until we'd been together for months. I don't know why. She just had this way of making you feel safe, like whatever you said she'd get. The weird thing started around our third or fourth hangout. She always had her phone face down, which I didn't really think twice about until I noticed she checked it constantly when I went to the bathroom or looked away. Not in a shady, texting another guy kind of way, more like she was managing something, like juggling tasks. I figured maybe it was work or a side hustle. She mentioned once that she wrote articles for websites sometimes, so I thought maybe she was working on freelance stuff. Anyway, it all blew up because of one dumb coincidence. My friend Claire, who I hadn't seen in ages, sent me a random message with a screenshot of an article. The title is The Soft Boy and the Sad Plant. 1 week with a man who loves his flaws. I had no clue what that meant until I saw the photo at the bottom. It wasn't my face, not directly, but it was my words. It was the exact story I told Nicole about my mom's garden, of the cactus I accidentally killed when I was 14 and felt guilty about for years. She laughed and said it was strangely poetic. Now that it was in print, tied to some narrative about emotionally distant men who weaponize their relatability. At first I thought it had to be a coincidence. Just similar phrasing, right? Then I scrolled and saw more. Stuff I told her about my old job, a line I used when I was nervous on our second date, a specific detail about a poster in my room. There was no question. It was me. I found the site. It wasn't huge, but it had enough of a following to make my stomach turn. Nicole didn't write under her real name, but her photo was in the contributor section. And there were other posts too, each one about a different guy, all dressed up in cute titles and jokes, painting each of us as some type of romantic archetype. There was the hobby collector, the man who doesn't think he's pretty, the one who doesn't know he's not deep. It was like a catalog of dudes she'd gone out with, broken down into personality types for the internet to gawk at. I didn't message her right away. I stared at the screen for like an hour, rereading the part where she called me unapologetically self-aware but dangerously detached, like I was a lab rat she was dissecting for a term paper. When I finally confronted her, it was honestly disappointing how chill she was about it, like she didn't even try to deny it. She said, "Yeah, I do that. It's kind of my thing." Like it was a hobby, like knitting or running or meal prepping. She told me I had good lines and that the piece came out really well, as if that was a compliment. She said she didn't name me, didn't post photos, didn't think it was a big deal because no one could possibly know it was me. I told her that didn't matter and she just shrugged. Said people write about dates all the time and I was overreacting. She genuinely didn't see the problem, or maybe she did, and just didn't care, which somehow felt worse. I stopped replying after that. She sent one more text saying she hoped I didn't take it personally, and that it was just a part of her creative process. I left it on read. I never really told anyone besides Claire and one other friend. Not because I was embarrassed, but because it's weird trying to explain why you feel so betrayed by someone who technically didn't do anything wrong. I just felt used. Like I'd shown up thinking I was building something real while she was already planning the headline. Now every time I see some viral dating article, I wonder how many other people that turned into content without knowing. How many people sat on a couch and opened up about their past while someone was mentally framing them for a post? It's made me quieter. Not bitter, just more private. I still date, but I don't talk about the deep stuff right away anymore. I save the stories. I keep the weird little facts to myself until I know someone's not going to treat me like a character in their latest piece. Anyway, that's what happened with Nicole. Maybe I should have seen it coming. But honestly, she was just that good. Okay, so right off the bat, I gotta say, I'm not one of those people who expects dating to be perfect or whatever. Like, I'm realistic. I've met enough weirdos, clingers, people who talk only about crypto, people who still wear their high school class ring. All of it. So my standards were pretty middle of the road by the time I matched with Alex. If you were funny, didn't make me solve a riddle to figure out your job, and didn't send voice notes unprompted, you were already a step above the rest. Alex, he was normal, like aggressively normal. His photos were basic. In that concert, one hiking, one holding a dog that probably wasn't his. Bio said something vague like trying to find someone who likes tacos and can hold a conversation, which is basically 70% of Tinder bios, but he wasn't annoying about it. He messaged something about the band on my shirt in one of my pics, and we just rolled from there. He was easy, like easy to talk to. He didn't try too hard. Asked questions, made jokes, didn't make it weird. After a few days of back and forth, we made plans to meet at this place that's basically a slightly cleaner dive bar. You know the type, sticky tables, string lights. The menu is either wings or wings with stuff on them. It was my choice, and he didn't flinch, which I liked. I hate when guys treat casual places like they're too good for them. So the first date went smooth. He wore this beat-up denim jacket that I thought was trying a little hard, but I let it slide. We talked about music, what city we'd live in if rent didn't exist, and how neither of us knew what a tax bracket really meant. We split the check. He insisted, and I didn't mind. I actually prefer that sometimes. Felt chill. Date 2 was a taco truck and a movie. Same vibe. Easygoing. He was one of those people who has an opinion on everything, but not in an annoying way. Like he cared about stuff, but wasn't trying to fight me about it. I like that. He asked what I thought about people who made dating content online. And I remember saying something like, as long as everyone's cool with it, I guess it's fine. At the time, I didn't think much of the question. I just figured he was the type to get stuck watching YouTube documentaries at 2 a.m. Seemed harmless. Now here's where things get weird, and I didn't notice how weird until much later. On our third date, we were at this tiny Thai spot that barely had enough lighting to read the menu. We sat by the window, and he made a joke about how it was good framing for a photo. I laughed, and he said, "No, seriously, it's got good symmetry." I thought he was just being artsy. He said he was into documentaries, but never gave me specifics. I just pictured him as one of those film bro types who swears they're gonna make something raw one day and never gets past editing the trailer. But then little things started stacking up. Every time we hung out, he'd suggest somewhere kind of aesthetic. Not just nice, but like very curated. Cats with neon signs, bookstores with velvet chairs, restaurants with open kitchens. And he always wanted to sit by the window or where the lighting hit us right. I didn't think much of it at first because, honestly, I like cute places too. But it started to feel intentional, like he was setting a scene. Then one night, we went to this diner that had been redone to look like it was straight out of the 60s. We were sitting in this red booth and sharing fries, and he casually pulled out his phone and leaned it against the napkin holder. I asked what he was doing, and he said, "Oh, just recording some ideas I've been working on. I like to get natural audio." Natural audio. I laughed and he was joking, but he just shrugged and kept it there, phone facing us, screen down. I started to feel off about it, but I didn't want to sound paranoid. He didn't say anything else about it, just kept talking like everything was normal. And yeah, I probably should have called it out harder, but I didn't. I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting. Next couple times we met up, he kept doing similar stuff, setting his phone in places where it could easily record. Sometimes he'd put its screen down near me. Sometimes he'd tuck it into his jacket pocket with the mic part out. Once he actually said, "I love how women talk about the little things men don't even notice," and then immediately flipped his phone around like he was checking a notification. I started connecting the dots. It wasn't just casual recording. He was documenting us. So one night I decided to press him. I asked point blank, "Are you recording our conversations?" And he just didn't deny it. He smiled and said something like, "Don't worry, it's all anonymous. It's for a project I'm doing." He said he was working on a documentary on modern dating and gender roles. Apparently, he'd been collecting clips of his own dates, and he included to use in the supposed film. He framed it like some deep sociological exploration, like, "I'm trying to explore how women perceive fairness in dating, who pays, who leads the convo, that kind of stuff." I was stunned, like you're literally turning me into a subject without asking. He tried to spin it like I should be flattered. Said he picked me because I was articulate and grounded, which felt fake as hell coming from a guy who couldn't even be honest about hitting record. I told him flat out it was messed up, and he said, "I wanted to capture real reactions, and I knew if I told people, they'd act different." No kidding, dude. That's what consent is for. After that, I left. Didn't yell, didn't make a scene, just stood up and walked out of the cafe. He tried to text me a few days later saying he'd blur my voice if he ever used the footage. I didn't respond. And I don't know if he was lying or if there's some 35-minute audio clip of me talking about the mental load of dating floating around in a hard drive somewhere. I try not to think about it. The weirdest part, he genuinely thought he was doing something smart. Like he believed he was exposing something deep and meaningful, like he was going to reveal the truth about dating through these secret recordings. In reality, he was just being a creep with a microphone and a superiority complex. Now, whenever I go on a date and someone pulls their phone out, I clock it. If you angle your phone toward me for aesthetics, I'm watching you. If you start talking about social dynamics or projects, I'm out. Alex probably still thinks he's some genius filmmaker uncovering gender hypocrisy. Meanwhile, I just wanted to eat dumplings and split a check without becoming part of someone's thesis. Alright, look, I'm not new to weird. Like, I've been on enough dates where the guy shows up and immediately starts trauma dumping, or says something unhinged like, I just really value traditional gender roles. So I didn't go into Tinder thinking it was gonna be romantic comedy territory. I just figured maybe I'd get a few decent convos. Meet someone cool, go for a drink. Worst case, I get a funny story. Best case, maybe something sticks. Whatever. So when I matched with Jacob, I wasn't all that hyped, to be honest. His pics were fine. Mostly selfies, one with a dog that clearly wasn't his, and one of him standing next to a bookshelf full of titles that screamed, I took a women's studies class once, and now I have opinions. His bio said grad student, thinking a lot, listening more, tallish. I figured, hey, at least he wasn't shirtless with a fish or holding a bottle of Hennessy in a group pic. He messaged me first and said something about how my playlist looked emotionally balanced, which made me laugh just because it was such a weird thing to say. We started chatting, and he was actually easy to talk to. Kind of wordy, maybe trying a little too hard to sound smart, but it was a nice change from the usual what you doing and you guys. We talked about podcasts, books, childhood cartoons. I mentioned I liked observational humor, and he recommended a comic I'd never heard of. It felt thoughtful. Our first date was this coffee shop that doubled as an art space. You know, the type of place where the menu is printed on recycled paper and the chairs don't match. It was freezing out, but he was already there when I arrived, typing on a laptop covered in weird stickers. He stood up when I got there, pulled out a chair, offered to get me something, and actually listened when I told him my order. Small things, but they stuck. We ended up sitting there for 2 hours. Talked about our college horror stories, our most irrational fears, mine's escalators, his was being trapped in a dumbwaiter, and how weird it is that people don't think Pluto is a planet anymore. He seemed smart but not condescending. A little awkward, but not in a red flag way. I left thinking, okay, this might actually go somewhere. We went on a few more dates after that, all his Loki places, bookstores, ramen shops, long walks where we detour into debates about why some people think The Office is peak comedy. He was respectful, made good eye contact, and was always kind of in his own head, which I found oddly charming. Like, you could see him thinking in real time. I liked that. But slowly, little things started to feel off. Not scary off. More like, why does this feel like a job interview off? He'd ask me weirdly specific questions, like, do you think your body type affects how people treat you in professional spaces? Or, have you ever felt fetishized, and how did you respond to it emotionally? I mean, deep questions are fine. I like when conversations go beyond surface stuff, but his were oddly worded, almost like he was reading them from somewhere or rehearsing them. Then, about 3 weeks in, I noticed that he writes stuff down on his phone after we talked. At first, I thought it was just messages or something, but I caught a glimpse once, and it was this long note with bullet points. I half joked, are you studying me or something? And he laughed and said, kind of still. And that's when things started to click. We were at this burger place and I pushed a little. Asked him what he meant. He got this look on his face like I'd caught him stealing snacks from a party. Then, after taking way too long to answer, he just said, I should probably be upfront. I'm doing a research paper, like for school. It's for my sociology seminar. I sat there, fries halfway in my mouth, just staring at him. He kept going. Said he was exploring body perception and societal narratives around desirability, and how people of different body types are treated in modern dating. He used those exact words. He said he was trying to observe how men interact with plus-sized women and how dynamics shift in different settings. First dates, texting, follow-ups, etc. I asked if he was joking. He said no, dead serious. And he had the nerve to add, "It's not about you specifically. You just happen to be one of the people I match with who fit the criteria." I didn't even know how to respond to that. I asked if anyone else knew what he was doing. He shrugged and said some did, some didn't. I was one of the organic cases, whatever that meant. He actually had the audacity to call it a live environment study. Like I was part of some social lab experiment and not, a person he was taking on actual dates. I asked if I was gonna be in his paper, and he said, "I anonymize everything, but yeah, probably." He genuinely didn't see what was wrong with it. Said he thought I'd be flattered that I had insightful perspectives and a unique voice in this space. Like I was supposed to be honored to be turned into a paragraph in his final project. I got up and left mid-meal. Didn't even ask him to pay for my food. Didn't care. I just needed to get away from him before I did something dramatic like dump my drink on his laptop. He texted me that night and said he was sorry I felt misrepresented and that he'd hoped the project could still be something mutually meaningful. I blocked him. I don't think I even fully processed how messed up it was until a few days later. Like, I kept second-guessing myself. Was I overreacting? It's just for class, right? But then I remembered the way he'd look at me during our convos. Not like he was connecting, but like he was analyzing. Like he was cataloging me. I told a few friends, and every single one of them said the same thing. That's so gross. Not just because of what he did, but because he knew exactly how to present himself in a way that made me trust him. He wasn't just studying societal narratives. He was creating one. Choosing someone based on their body, pretending to be into them, and framing the whole thing as academic research is manipulative, plain and simple. I don't know what grade he got, but I hope his professor saw through the bullshit. After that, I took a break from dating altogether. Not forever, just long enough to stop questioning if every guy who compliments me is secretly taking notes for some thesis. I go on dates now that I pay closer attention. I watch for the way they listen, the way they ask questions. If it starts to feel like a questionnaire instead of a conversation, I'm out. And as for Jacob, hope your little paper was worth it, man. Silly goose fool. Okay with the freaks, man. If I'm being completely honest, I was hella bored when I got into it with Layla. Like, not just regular bored, more like mentally overstimulated and emotionally underwhelmed. Everything felt kinda beige. Work was repetitive. My friends were all coupled up doing their build a life together thing. And I'd watched the same 6 shows on rotation so many times I was quoting them in my sleep. I wasn't actively searching for a relationship or anything, but I figured, hey, it might be nice to have someone to text at night or go get fries with. So I opened Tinder again, not really expecting much. And then Layla popped up. She had this calm vibe in her photos. Not trying too hard, not in some nightclub bathroom with 3 other girls, just a couple shots of her reading on a bench, smiling at a dog, sipping iced coffee with sunglasses too big for her face. Her bio just said, recovering perfectionist. Likes foggy mornings, bad karaoke, and men who don't take themselves too seriously. Something about it made me pause. It didn't sound fake deep or like she Googled quirky girl bios. It was just chill. We matched, and she messaged first, which I always like. Something about the mug in my profile pic. She said it looked like one her grandma used to have. Random, but it made me laugh. We got into this long convo about weird family heirlooms, and then just kept going. Music, food we hated as kids but love now, niche internet rabbit holes. She was funny and sharp and had this slow burn charm to her, like she wasn't trying to impress you, but still kinda did without meaning to. We decided to meet up a few days later. She suggested this hole-in-the-wall bookstore that had a hidden cafe in the back. Not something I would have picked, but it was a good vibe. I got there first, ordered some tea I pretended to know how to pronounce, and then she walked in wearing this huge sweater and boots that looked like they'd survived 3 winters. She gave me a quick smile, like half nervous, half curious. We ended up sitting on this old floral couch drinking overpriced drinks and talking for 3 hours. The more time we spent together, the more I liked her. She was observant, like she'd remember I said I had a meeting and text me good luck, or notice when I switched up how I styled my hair. She listened without interrupting, laughed at my dumb jokes, and never made things feel awkward. We hung out at bookstores, parks, even this one garage sale where she tried on every hat and made me rate them like we were judges on a game show. I wasn't falling fast or anything, but I definitely liked her. Now here's where it got weird. We were probably 4 or 5 weeks into seeing each other when I noticed something. We were at her apartment, sitting on the floor eating takeout, and she had her phone out to show me some video. When she swiped out of the app, I saw a photo on her background, and I froze. It was me. Or like, it looked exactly like me. Not the exact same haircut, but the face, the build, the way the guy was standing, it was too close. At first, I genuinely thought it was me from a different day. But then I saw the day at the bottom. It was from 2 years ago. I asked her about it, half joking like, okay, who's that? Your other Tinder match, expecting her to laugh and change it or brush it off. But she didn't laugh. She got real quiet for a second and then said, that's my fiancé. I blinked. Fiancé. She nodded and said he passed away about a year and a half ago. She said it softly, like she'd had to say a lot and hated every time. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I'd just walked into a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I asked her if she was okay with talking about it, and she just looked at me for a second and said, I probably should have told you earlier. She told me his name was Evan. They were together for 4 years, engaged for 1. He died in some freak accident, something car-related, sudden, awful. The way she talked about him didn't feel dramatic. It was more like she was walking me through a room she hadn't let anyone into in a while. I sat there listening, trying to be respectful, not sure what to say or what she wanted from me. Then she looked at me and said, you remind me of him. I laughed awkwardly and said something like, yeah, I'd noticed that from the photo. But she didn't smile. She just nodded. And then she said, that's kind of why I swiped on you. That's when my stomach did the thing. You know that feeling when the air shifts and suddenly you're not just on a date anymore. You're part of something else. That. She told me without flinching that when she saw my profile, she froze. Said it felt like someone was playing a joke on her. That I looked just enough like him to make her feel like the universe was sending her a message. She admitted she'd been curious, wanted to know if talking to me would feel like closure or healing or something she couldn't explain. I asked, so was this whole thing about him? And she shook her head immediately. Said she didn't mean for it to go that far. That she didn't expect to like me on my own. But then she kind of hesitated, and that pause said everything. I didn't freak out or storm off or anything. I just sat there suddenly hyper-aware of my own face, wondering how many times she looked at me and saw someone else, wondering if she was comparing my laugh, the way I held chopsticks, the way I tilted my head when I didn't get a joke. I felt like I'd been part of something I didn't sign up for, like I was a placeholder in someone else's story. She tried to explain more, said it wasn't about replacing him, that was different, that she liked me for me, but it was too late. That knowledge had already settled in the back of my head, and now every time she looked at me, I was questioning why. Was it because of me or because I scratched some itch her brain hadn't let go of? After that night, things just kind of fizzled. We still texted for a bit, but the vibe was off. I didn't trust her intentions anymore, and I think she knew it. She eventually sent me this long message saying she was sorry for not telling me sooner, and that maybe she wasn't ready to be dating anyone at all. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. Now, and I still think about it, not in a bitter way, just weirdly. Like, how many people out there are looking for ghosts of someone else? How many of us are walking into stories that started long before we arrived? Listen, yeah, I'd take a little break from dating apps before I met Ben. Like a proper delete the app, don't reinstall it after 2 glasses of wine kind of break. I just needed a reset. I'd been on too many awkward dates where the guy either talked only about himself, asked 0 questions, or said something wild like, I'm a Sagittarius, so I can't be monogamous. You get burnt out after a while, you know. But one weekend, I was hanging with my cousin who insisted on doing what she called a soft re-entry into dating for me. Basically, she made me re-download Tinder and sat there swiping for me like it was a team sport. And that's when we came across Ben. Ben looked like someone who hosted trivia nights or ran a record shop. Kind eyes, scruffy beard, dimples. His photos were all kind of mellow, one in front of a food truck, one holding a cat, one where he was sitting at a table laughing mid-convo. Nothing showy, no shirtless bathroom selfies, no weird motivational quotes. His bio was short, that something like, recovering overthinker. Will 100% share my fries with you. It felt grounded, chill. We matched. He messaged first, asked me something about my favorite midnight snack. I said popcorn with nutritional yeast and sea salt, and he told me that was elite taste. From there, we were off. He had this really gentle way of talking. Not soft, exactly, but thoughtful. He'd actually read my answers, remembered what I said, circled back to things I'd mentioned. When we started texting more regularly, he'd ask how work was going, whether my annoying neighbor was still stomping around upstairs, and if I tried that podcast he suggested. He seemed so invested, but not in a love-bombing way. It just felt like he paid attention. We met for coffee first, and it was raining that day, which I weirdly liked. He showed up with this oversized raincoat and 2 umbrellas just in case, which made me laugh. He smelled like cedarwood and mint, and talked like someone who had actually done therapy, not just talked about it. We walked around under a shared umbrella, drinking warm coffee, and making jokes about how every dog we passed probably had a better skincare routine than us. A few dates in, we were already in a rhythm. Nothing serious, but he was texting me goodnight, checking in on my day, showing up on time. He talked a lot about his life in a reflective way. Stuff about slowing down, wanting more peace, taking care of himself. I liked that. It felt like he had perspective. I found myself opening up faster than I usually do. It was easy with him. He was comforting in a way I wasn't used to. Then one night, out of nowhere, he tells me there's something he wants me to know. We're sitting on my couch, half watching a movie we both weren't paying attention to, and he just drops it. He says he has a terminal illness. Nothing dramatic. He says it gently, almost like it's something he's gotten used to saying. I just kind of sat there stunned. He didn't cry or make it theatrical, but his face got serious, and he looked tired, like he'd been carrying it for a while. I asked questions, obviously. He said it was rare. Some degenerative autoimmune thing. Said he'd been given a timeline, but doctors weren't sure. Could be a few years, could be longer. He said he wasn't telling me because he wanted pity. He just didn't want to waste my time or lead me into something I wasn't ready for. I respected that. Honestly, I was floored by how open he was. I remember sitting there feeling a mix of heartache and guilt. Like, how do you even respond to that? I didn't run. I didn't ghost. I told him I appreciated him telling me. I said I was still figuring out how I felt about all of it, but that I wasn't going anywhere just yet. He smiled, kissed my hand like we were in some indie movie, and we just sat there for a while in silence. After that night, things got intense fast. He started opening up more, telling me about bucket list stuff, places he wanted to go, little things he was scared he wouldn't have time for. He talked about wanting to leave behind good memories, to not be a burden to anyone. And I started feeling like I was part of something important, something real. Like maybe I could be someone who brought comfort into his life, even if it wasn't forever. But then weird things started happening. Little cracks. He'd forget the timeline he'd given me. One day it was 3 years, another time it was 1. He mentioned treatments he was doing, but never really named them. Said he was too exhausted to hang out sometimes. But then I'd see he'd been out with friends the same night. I didn't want to accuse him of lying. I mean, who lies about something like that? So I kept it to myself, chalked it up to bad memory or stress. Then one day I ran into someone he knew. Total coincidence. I was at this bookstore, and I spotted him across the room with a girl. He didn't see me, but the girl waved at someone behind me, and I turned to look. That's when the guy next to me, this older man, asked if I was a friend of Ben's. I said, yeah, kinda. And the guy just casually said, oh yeah, Ben's hilarious. We used to work together at the college. Haven't seen him much since he got into acting. I was like acting. I played it cool, didn't say anything else, but when I got home, I went down the rabbit hole, searched his full name, added short film after it, and boom, there he was. MD page, a couple interviews, a podcast appearance, and in one of the videos he talks about emotional immersion, something he practices when writing or auditioning. He says he believes in blurring the line between experience and imagination to fully embody characters. And then I found something that made my stomach drop. A short film he'd written, the main character. A man with a rare terminal illness trying to find love before his time runs out. I read that summary twice. Everything, every line, every moment he'd shared with me sounded like it had been lifted from his own script. That was it for me. I didn't confront him. I didn't send some dramatic message or ask for an explanation. I just blocked him everywhere. I couldn't even bring myself to be angry at first. I just felt used. Not like emotionally manipulated in some cartoon villain way, but like it was a rehearsal. Like he wanted someone to react to mirror his story back at him so he could fine-tune it. And I did. I gave him that reaction. I gave him the empathy, the softness, the late-night talks and quiet silences, all for something he didn't even live. Looking back, I still don't fully get it. I don't know if he was a terrible person or just deeply messed up in his own head. I still replay that couch moment sometimes, how real it felt. But now it just feels like a really convincing scene. One I didn't know I was in. What a joke, man. Okay, so this one started weirdly hopeful, which is maybe why it threw me so hard. Like, I wasn't in a jaded place. For once, I just moved into a new apartment that didn't smell like the previous tenant's takeout, started a new job I didn't hate, and my roommate's cat had finally stopped biting me every morning. Things were all right. I felt kind of open, which was rare. I downloaded Tinder again after one of those nights where you're just sitting around with too many snacks and too much quiet. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe someone to flirt with. Maybe someone to get ramen with. I wasn't pressed either way. Then I matched with Hannah. Her profile was so unassuming, it was actually refreshing. No hot girl at Coachella energy, no filtered selfies that made her look like she was being preserved in glass. Just some simple photos, one with a coffee cup and a giant scarf, one where she was hiking somewhere leafy, and one candid shot of her laughing with her hair all tangled in the wind. Her bio said something like, child-free by choice, obsessed with ginger tea and books about cults. That last part made me laugh. We started messaging the same night. From the jump, she came off confident. Not in an arrogant way, more like she knew who she was and wasn't trying to mold herself to fit anyone's idea of a dream date. We talked a lot, like a lot. Every day, long messages, real questions. She actually wanted to know what I thought about things, big and small. From, what's the worst advice you've ever gotten? To, do you believe in fate or just timing? I liked talking to her. She was smart, a little cynical, and super funny in this kind of dry, sarcastic way that just worked for me. I asked if she wanted to meet up after a week of messaging, and she said yes like it wasn't even a question. That alone was a green flag, no games, no stalling. We went out for lunch first, just something simple. She wore this oversized coat and black boots that made her look like she belonged in a detective movie. We sat outside, despite the cold, and drank hot coffee while people watching and rating strangers' outfits like we were judges on a low-budget fashion show. The vibe was easy, nothing forced. We joked about having matching RBS and bonded over both having zero coordination when it came to winter sports. Over the next few weeks, we hung out a lot. She came over to mine for takeout and movies. I went to hers once or twice, though she always said her place was in a state of chaos and didn't love hosting. I didn't think anything of it. She cooked me this ridiculously good tomato soup once and told me about her brief obsession with becoming a sommelier, which only lasted until she realized she hated wine. Stuff like that. Silly little details that made her feel real. She always doubled down on being child-free. Like, not in a ranting way, just super firm and casual about it. She said she'd known since she was a teenager and couldn't understand why people assumed she'd change her mind. I'd never really thought about it too deeply before, but I respected how certain she was. It made me think she was one of those people who just really knew herself. So imagine how confused I was when the kid stuff started leaking out. It started with her phone. We were watching some bad action movie on her couch when it buzzed. She picked it up quickly, kind of shielded the screen, and typed something fast before putting it face down. I didn't say anything because, whatever, people have their reasons. But then maybe 20 minutes later it buzzed again. This time she sighed before responding, like she was stressed. She didn't offer an explanation, just kind of muttered something about family stuff. Okay, fine, not my business yet. But then it happened again, and again. Always when we were hanging out, always quick replies, always vague. I started noticing toys in the corners of her apartment too, like not everywhere, but enough to catch my eye. A small basket of plastic dinosaurs under the shelf. A random pair of light-up sneakers by the door. Once I saw a crane drawing stuck to her fridge that said, "Mommy," in shaky handwriting. I didn't say anything, but my brain absolutely clocked it. The moment it all came out was stupidly casual. We were at a weekend market, eating dumplings on a bench, and she got a call. She stepped away to answer it, and I'd overheard her say, "I'll be there to pick them up by 6. Not her, not him, but them. As in plural, hids. When she came back, I just looked at her. I didn't even have to ask. She saw my face and just exhaled like she'd been waiting for this. So, yeah, she had kids. 2. She had them young with a guy she didn't want to talk about, and they lived part-time with her and part-time with her parents. She said she didn't bring it up because she was testing something. I asked her what that meant, and she said she wanted to see how guys treated her when they thought she didn't have kids. Said she'd gotten tired of being treated like she was damaged goods, or some life project by men once they found out. So now she didn't tell people up front. She waited. She said I passed most of her tests, so she figured it was time to tell me. I didn't even know how to react. I just sat there trying to process the idea that I'd been part of a trial run I didn't agree to. It wasn't even the kids. I don't hate kids. It was the lie. The fact that the thing she was most clear about, being child-free, was literally not true. I asked her why she couldn't just be honest, and she said, because men don't stick around when they hear single mom. They treat it like a trap. She said she wanted to be seen as a person first, not a parent. I get that, I really do. But it doesn't make it less messed up. She asked if it changed how I saw her. And honestly, yeah, it did. Not because she had kids, but because she'd looked me in the face so many times and doubled down on something that wasn't true. Because every time I'd asked her about that stuff and she gave me that confident, child-free by choice line, she was testing me, measuring my reaction, waiting for the moment she could switch gears and be like, surprise. That was all fake. I left that day feeling like I'd walked into a story halfway through and nobody bothered to catch me up. I wasn't mad exactly, just confused. Sad, maybe, because I'd liked her. I'd started to think maybe this one could go somewhere, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been auditioning for a role I didn't know existed. She texted me later saying she understood if I didn't want to keep seeing her, but that she'd hope I'd see where she was coming from. I never replied, not because I hated her or wanted to ghost her, but because I didn't have the right words, and I wasn't gonna send some closure message that made her feel better for lying. Okay, guys, I'll just say this up front. I actually like dating. I know people complain about how exhausting it is or whatever, but I'm not one of those. I think it's kind of like fun, like meeting someone new, figuring out their little quirks, the awkward laughs, the early banter where you're both pretending you don't Google people. It's entertaining. If nothing else, it makes for solid group chat material. You get me. So when I matched with Daniel, I wasn't looking for some fairy tale. I was just hoping for someone who could carry a conversation and maybe didn't have 3 blurry gym selfies as their whole personality. He stood out immediately. His profile had 0 shirtless pics. His clothes actually fit. And his bio just said, "I plan good dates and order the best things on the menu." You'll see. Confident but not cringy. I liked it. Our first few messages were super normal. He asked about my favorite late-night food spot. We traded takes on which movie franchise went downhill the fastest. And he didn't ask anything weird or too personal. Just normal, which at that point already made him rare. We met at this rooftop bar on a Thursday. The place was a little fancy, but he picked it and said he had hookups, which I took to mean discounts or knowing the bartender or something. He showed up on time, smelled like citrus and something expensive, and wore this fitted dark coat that made him look like he lived in some sleek downtown apartment. He was polite, had great energy, and introduced me to this cocktail with lavender in it that I'd never think to order myself. I remember texting my friend after saying, I think this guy might actually have his life together. Over the next couple of weeks, we went out maybe 4 or 5 more times. Always really nice places, fancier than what I usually do for early dates. One was a Peruvian spot with a tiny handwritten menu. One was a speakeasy-style bar with no signs. One was a wine-tasting thing that felt wildly out of my price range, but he made it seem casual. I offered to split every time, but he always waved me off. Said it was his treat or he invited, so it's on him. I didn't push it because, honestly, if you want to pay and you're confident about it, cool. especially when you're choosing places that have a $19 cocktail minimum. After about a month of seeing each other, things were starting to pick up. We weren't serious, but we were definitely past the let's see stage. He'd started sending me good morning texts, dropping in with thinking about you messages, and even mentioned wanting to take a weekend trip at some point. I wasn't planning our wedding or anything, but yeah, I was into it. Then I got the invoice. No joke. An actual PDF. I was at work eating a sad desk salad, and this email from Daniel popped up with the subject line, transparency. At first, I thought it was a joke. Like maybe he sent me some meme or was being cute about budgeting or whatever. I opened it, and there it was, a full breakdown of every date we'd been on. The restaurant names, what we ordered, the total bill, and half of each total circled in red. At the bottom, he'd written, I believe in accountability and fairness in dating. I'm looking for a partner, not a dependent. Hope you understand. I sat there staring at the screen for a solid 5 minutes, just blinking, like, what? I read it again, thinking maybe I missed something. Nope. He really expected me to retroactively pay him back for 4 or 5 dates that he very clearly offered to cover. No hints, no passive-aggressive jokes about splitting, just straight up, I got this. And now, a month later, he wanted reimbursement, like it was some freelance project. I replied and asked if he was being serious. He said he was. Said he was tired of performative generosity and thought it was time people started challenging traditional dating expectations. He said he didn't want to start things with a foundation of imbalance. I was floored, not even because of the money. I could have covered my half, no problem. I would if he'd asked. I offered multiple times, but this was weird. This was calculated. It felt like he'd set a trap just to see how I'd react. I asked why he waited. Why not say something on the first or second date? He said he wanted to see how I handled it long term. That it was part of testing compatibility. That's when it clicked. This guy didn't just want fairness. He wanted a controlled outcome. He wanted to see how much I'd tolerate, and when I didn't push, he'd pounce. I told him straight up, you could have just told me you preferred to split things. I would have been fine with that. This is not it. He said, I didn't want to scare you off early. Most women aren't ready for real equality. I left that message on read. I didn't pay him back, in case you're wondering. Not out of spite, but because I didn't owe him anything. That's not how it works. If you offer to pay, you pay. You don't tally it up later and turn it into some moral lesson. And you definitely don't use words like accountability when you mean control. A few days later, he texted me something about still wanting to continue the connection. I didn't answer. There was no connection. There was a guy who treated dates like investments and expected a return. That's not dating. That's a transaction. That's some spreadsheet energy I want nowhere near my love life. Honestly, it still makes me laugh when I think about it. Like, imagine being so deep in your own ego that you think dropping an invoice on someone is normal. Like you're teaching them something. Like they'll be impressed by your commitment to equality when really you're just too scared to say what you want up front. I met Lily at like the exact moment I swore off Tinder for the 3rd time that year. I'd been out of town for a week and came back to a ton of unread messages, bills I forgot to pay, and a creeping sense of loneliness that hit harder than usual. Not to sound dramatic, but something about coming home to a dead plant and an empty fridge makes you feel like a side character in your own life. So I re-downloaded the app out of habit, mostly just to feel like I wasn't the last single person alive. Lily was the first person I matched with that night. Her photos were effortlessly cool. Polaroid style, nothing staged, just her at flea markets, reading in weird corners, riding a bike at golden hour. She had short bangs, round glasses, and this vibe that said she knew how to roll a cigarette but probably hated smoking. Her bio said, creative brain. Gemini rising. Be interesting. That last line kind of annoyed me, but also fair. We started chatting, and she was quick with replies, full of references to bands I didn't know but pretended to, and had a thing for asking random questions like, what would your childhood bedroom say about you now? Stuff like that. It was fun. We weren't talking about jobs and exes and trauma in the first 3 messages, which is all I really wanted. We met at this little bakery that had 0 seating but supposedly the best croissants in the city. She showed up with headphones around her neck, eyeliner slightly smudged, and paint on her fingers. I remember thinking she looked like she came out of an indie film where nobody ever pays rent but somehow lives in a perfect loft. She smelled like cider and something sweet, and she talked like she had to get all her thoughts out before they disappeared. The date went well, really well actually. We walked around the neighborhood after, sharing a pastry, window shopping, making up stories about the people we passed. She'd spin these wild scenarios like this old man walking his dog was a retired magician and the dog used to be his assistant. It was ridiculous and I couldn't stop laughing. Over the next few weeks, we hung out more and more. Lily wasn't a planner. Everything with her was spontaneous. She'd text me in the middle of the afternoon like, "Want to go yell at ducks?" Or, "I just found a mirror on the street, help me carry it." And I'd say yes. It was refreshing. I wasn't used to someone just pulling me into their world like that. She'd always mention her roommate, Jay. Said his name a lot in passing, like Jay hogged the kettle again, or Jay's allergic to cinnamon but keeps eating it. It became this weird inside joke between us, like Jay was this mythical, annoying but lovable ghost in her apartment. I figured he was just some artsy guy who also didn't know how to budget and probably wore cardigans with holes in them. Eventually, she invited me over. It was late, maybe 10 p.m., and she said we could order food and watch old French films she promised I wouldn't understand. Her place was exactly what I pictured: tiny, cluttered, cozy, with weird lighting and too many plants. I noticed right away that it was a bit too clean for how chaotic she described her life, like someone had actually tried to tidy up. She laughed and said Jay was surprisingly domestic. He wasn't home when I got there, but his presence was obvious. One side of the living room was clearly someone else's zone: records, speakers, a pair of heavy boots lined up neatly. There were framed photos on the shelves, but none of them had just Lily in them. Always her and Jay, always close. One had her sitting in his lap, and it didn't look friendly. I asked her who took the photo as she paused for just a second, too long before saying, "My friend Naga." That's when my stomach dropped a little. We ate on the floor, watching a movie with barely any dialogue, and I couldn't stop thinking about the photos. Something wasn't adding up, so I asked her casually, "How long have you and Jay been roommates?" And she goes, "Oh, like 6 years. 6 years, that's a long time. Most roommates don't last longer than your phone contract." I tried to joke, "Wow, you two must be married by now," and she didn't laugh. She just kind of tilted her head and said, "Yeah, it kind of feels like that sometimes." That was my new. I didn't say anything, but I knew. The next few times we hung out, I kept noticing more. The way she talked about Jay wasn't neutral. It was familiar, protective, intimate, like she was constantly filtering what she could say to me without giving too much away. And then one night, it all clicked. We were at this small outdoor concert, packed shoulder to shoulder with people, and she introduced me to a few of her friends. One of them, this tall guy in a band shirt, looked at me and said, "Wait, are you the one from the videos?" I said, "What videos?" And he kind of chuckled awkwardly and said, "Oh, nothing. Lily and Jay do this couple's content thing sometimes, like skits and relationship bits. It's funny. I just figured." I didn't even hear the rest. My brain was stuck on one word: couples. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't want to cause a scene or ruin the vibe, but on the train home I couldn't stop thinking about it. The photos, the way she talked about him, the weirdness when I asked questions, and now videos, skits. She had a whole fake life online with this guy she called her roommate. The next morning I looked it up, searched her handle, dug around, and there it was. A TikTok account with thousands of followers. Lily and Jay doing little scenes about what it's like to live with your boyfriend who never replaces the toilet paper, or when your girlfriend says she's not hungry. All captioned with couple hashtags. All filled with comments saying things like, "You two are couple goals." I stared at the screen, trying to figure out what was real. Had I missed something? Was it a joke account? Were they exes? Siblings with weird chemistry? But no, these weren't just funny roommate bits. This was clearly relationship stuff. Every video screamed we're together. So I called her. I asked straight up, "Are you and Jay dating?" She was quiet for a while, then finally said, "We used to be. It's complicated. We still live together. It's kind of hard to explain." I said, "Are you still posting couple content together?" She didn't answer that one. Not really. Just mumbled something about how it's performative and not that deep, and people don't know the whole context. I told her I was done. Not because she had an ex in her house. I could have handled that. but because she dragged me into something messy without saying a word. Because she made me think I was getting to know her when really I was just a side character in the weird public performance of her not quite over it relationship. I haven't talked to her since. She still shows up on my feed sometimes, laughing in slow motion next to Jay in matching outfits. I was in a pretty good place when I met Chris. Like, not perfect or anything. My car made a weird noise when I hit 40. My neighbor was deep into his DJ era and played bass heavy mixes at 1 a.m. And my boss liked to email me quick questions that turned into 2-hour tasks. But overall, I was doing all right. I liked my job. I liked my space. I was finally at a point where dating didn't feel like some desperate attempt to fill a void. More like a side quest I didn't mind exploring. Chris was one of the first people I matched with after rejoining Tinder. He looked kind of unbothered in his pictures, like someone who'd make fun of people for ordering the same thing at every restaurant, but secretly did it himself. Nothing flashy. Jeans, sneakers, always holding coffee. One of his photos was just his bookshelf, and I zoomed in out of curiosity. Mostly fiction, a few businessy titles, and one about emotional intelligence, which I took as a hopeful sign. He messaged me something simple like, "Hey, you look like you'd crush trivia night," and we were off from there. He had that easy sarcasm that made texting fun. Not too many emojis, no weird jazz, and thank God, no pet names like Babe before we even met. He told me he worked in creative direction at some agency and did freelance design on the side. I told him about my job in project management and how I'm really good at organizing other people's chaos while barely managing my own. First date was chill, coffee, and pastries at this spot that only plays 90s R backslash and B and has chairs that feel like they were stolen from someone's grandma's living room. He smelled good, not in a wore too much cologne way, more like he just always smelled like fresh laundry and sitter. He was charismatic, sharp, and actually listened when I talked. Asked follow-up questions. Smiled when I got excited about stupid stuff like my calendar app or finding the perfect pen. Second date, he brought me a notebook because I mentioned mine was falling apart. Just a simple Moleskine, nothing dramatic, but thoughtful. We walked around for hours, talking about everything from conspiracy theories to how we both secretly judge people who clap when the plane lands. I was into it. He felt grounded. Interesting. Someone who could hold space without making everything about him. So we kept seeing each other. No huge sparks, no dramatic moments, but consistent. Easy. He'd text every morning, check in when I had a long day, send me songs he thought I'd like. He started talking more about his work, how he was building his own brand and consulting on the side, and I thought it was cool. He seemed ambitious in a way that wasn't show-offy. Then, maybe like 4 weeks in, he started asking questions about my job. At first it was harmless. What kind of stuff do I manage? Do I like my coworkers? Do I feel challenged? Normal. But slowly it started to shift. He started making little comments like, "You ever think about doing your own thing?" Or, "Seems like your job takes more than it gives." I mean, yeah, sometimes it's exhausting, but it's a stable job with decent pay and I don't hate it, which is more than most people can say. I told him that. He just nodded, said something vague like, "Just feels like you're meant for more." I appreciated the hype, but it was starting to feel weird. He kept pushing the idea. Not aggressively, but in this sort of smooth, casual way, like planting seeds. He'd say stuff like, "You'd be so good at consulting. You already do half of it for free at your job." Or, "If you quit now, you could build something before the end of the year." It wasn't just hypothetical anymore. He was suggesting timelines, ideas. He even offered to help me map out a plan. I remember one night we were sitting on his balcony, and he goes, "What if you just stopped showing up to work for a week? See what happens." I laughed, but he didn't. He was dead serious. Said, "People don't realize how much freedom they have until they test the boundaries." That's when the little alarm bells started going off. I asked him if he ever had a regular job, and he said, "Briefly, but I've always known I'm not built for that blood." He made it sound like choosing a 9 to 5 was some kind of failure, that anyone doing it was settling. I tried explaining that I actually like structure, that not everyone wants to be a brand or a startup. He just kind of looked at me like I'd said I wanted to be average forever. Things started feeling off after that. He kept finding subtle ways to criticize how I lived. Called my morning routine too rigid, said the way I planned my week in a digital calendar was corporate brainwashing. He'd say it with a laugh, but it stuck. He acted like having a stable income was something to be suspicious of, that the only real freedom was in quitting and building from scratch. The weirdest moment was when I mentioned a promotion I was being considered for. He didn't congratulate me, just asked, "But if they're promoting you, doesn't that mean they're just giving you more work for a little more money?" I said, "Yeah, maybe, but also, it was a recognition of my effort, and I actually liked my team." He said, "You're celebrating being more useful to a system that drains you." I don't even remember what I said to that. I just felt tired, like I was being talked into a corner I didn't ask to stand in. Then came the last straw. We were out to eat, nothing fancy, just a casual spot, and he started talking about this idea he had for a business. I said it sounded cool, and he said, "I think you could help. I mean, you have to leave your job, obviously, but imagine having full control of your time. We'd build something real." We. That's when I realized he'd been setting this up from the beginning. All those compliments, all "you're smarter than this" comments, that you could do more talk, it wasn't about supporting me. It was about shaping me into someone who fit into his vision. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a teammate for a dream I didn't even share. I didn't flip out or anything. I just told him I wasn't looking to blow up my life for someone else's startup. He said I was stuck in a scarcity mindset. I said I was just fine. I liked my job. I liked having insurance. I liked not tying my identity to a grin set. He looked genuinely disappointed. I left that night and didn't look back. He texted me a few days later saying, "No hard feelings. I just hope you find something that excites you one day." I rolled my eyes so hard I gave myself a headache. A guy who wanted to empower me as long as it meant quitting my job and joining his personal cult of productivity. Oh, Tinder. I matched with Jordan during a month where I was hyper-focused on health stuff. You know those phases where you suddenly start meal prepping and doing yoga YouTube videos like your life depends on it? That was me. I cut out dairy, was drinking disgusting green juice on purpose, and had somehow convinced myself I enjoyed walking around the park with a weighted vest. So when Jordan's profile said, "into fitness, clean food, and deep conversations," I was like, okay, maybe this guy is on the same wavelength. His pictures were clean, like unusually polished for Tinder. One of him on a hike, one shirtless, but not in a thirst trap way. More like, look at my healthy lifestyle. And one of him reading a book with no title visible. He had a symmetrical face and that straight white-toothed smile that makes you think either good genes or dental work. His bio also mentioned he worked in biotech and was interested in human potential, which sounded a little vague but kind of impressive. We started chatting, and he was very curious. Not flirty, not goofy, curious. Like every message was a question. What do you eat most days? How'd you sleep lately? Any health conditions in the family? He sprinkled in compliments here and there, but mostly it felt like I was filling out a detailed intake form at a new doctor's office. Still, I figured maybe he was just a nerd about wellness. I wasn't creeped out yet. He asked to meet up after a couple days. No drawn-up texting, no weird small talk. I liked that. We met at a juice bar, his idea, and he showed up in all-black athleisure, holding a glass water bottle with some sort of motivational sticker on it. He greeted me with a hug and immediately complimented my posture. Like, not my outfit or hair, my posture. Said I'd stood like someone who hadn't given up on life. It made me laugh, and I'll admit I was kind of charmed by how weird he was. We sat outside, and he ordered some disgusting-sounding celery turmeric blend. I got something sweeter just to balance out the bitterness of the conversation, because once we started talking, it got intense fast. Jordan didn't really do small talk. He jumped straight into heavy stuff. He asked about my family, like specifically how long my grandparents lived, if there was any history of inflammatory illness, and whether I'd ever broken a bone. When I gave vague answers, he'd press, not rudely, just like someone who was really, really invested in knowing exactly what kind of human I was. I asked him why he cared so much, and he told me, completely casually, that he was fascinated by genetics, that his work was partially research-based, and that he couldn't help but apply some of those frameworks to dating. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He was not joking. He said it made sense to assess compatibility on multiple levels: emotional, physical, genetic, financial. Said most people ignored half the equation and then acted surprised when relationships failed. I nodded, pretending to go along with it, but inside I was like, what? Despite all that, he was actually enjoyable to be around in a weird way. He didn't make dumb jokes, didn't check his phone, didn't brag. He was focused and kind of intense, but he asked good questions and made you feel like you were the only person that existed in that moment. That part was nice. So I saw him again. And again. We started seeing each other maybe once or twice a week. Always daytime dates, always somewhere healthy. Hiking, rock climbing, weird boutique food places that looked like science labs. He'd always order things with chia seeds and spirulina and explain what each ingredient was doing to his body. He was definitely extra, but also oddly consistent. No red flags yet, just a little eccentric. But then the questions got deeper. He asked for my blood type. I told him I wasn't sure, and he looked genuinely disappointed. He asked if I'd ever done a 23andMe or ancestry test. I said yeah, years ago. He got excited and asked if I still had the raw data. I thought he meant like for fun facts, so I said maybe I'd have to check. He said I could run it through a couple filters and show you some cool stuff, like immune system markers and behavioral predictors. That was the moment I knew he wasn't just curious. He had a system. I didn't bring it up again for a few days, but it sat in the back of my head. Like, was he dating or evaluating? I started thinking about all the questions he'd asked. None of them were about what I liked or what made me laugh or what I cared about. It was always metrics, inputs, history, health. He asked how my dental work, my metabolism, how I reacted to vaccines, what my sleep score was on my fitness tracker. It felt less like someone getting to know me and more like I was being slowly entered into some spreadsheet. One night, I asked him directly, "Are you making some kind of list?" Half joking, but only half. He said, "Yeah, actually. Not like a literal list of pros and cons, but I do have a system. I rank people I go out with based on a few categories." I asked what kind of categories. He said, genetic compatibility, psychological alignment, and lifestyle cohesion. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. I laughed at first, but he didn't. He said he gave people scores, not to judge them, but to be more intentional. He said I ranked higher than most. That I had great sleep discipline and a good emotional regulation profile. I asked how he even judged that. He said, "You didn't cry the night you told me about your childhood stuff. That's impressive." Impressive. I felt weird. Not angry, just reduced. Like I've been doing a performance I didn't know about, and I was getting graded on it. I told him that didn't sit right with me. That wasn't a system to be optimized. That maybe instead of ranking people, he could try knowing them. He said, "That's what I'm doing. That way it just cuts out the noise." That was our last date. He texted once after that, sent me a screenshot of a podcast episode about evolutionary attraction, and said it reminded him of our conversations. I didn't reply. I kept thinking about how calm he was when he said all that. Like he genuinely believed he cracked some dating code. Like he couldn't even see how strange it was to turn people into categories and assign them value based on imaginary points. I wasn't mad that I didn't score a perfect 10. I was mad that there was a score at all. I matched with Jordan during a month where I was hyper-focused on health stuff. You know those phases where you suddenly start meal prepping and doing yoga YouTube videos like your life depends on it. That was me. I cut out dairy, was drinking disgusting green juice on purpose, and had somehow convinced myself I enjoyed walking around the park with a weighted vest. So when Jordan's profile said, "into fitness, clean food, and deep conversations," I was like, okay, maybe this guy is on the same wavelength. His pictures were clean, like unusually polished for Tinder. One of him on a hike, one shirtless but not in a thirst trap way, more like, look at my healthy lifestyle, and one of him reading a book with no title visible. He had a symmetrical face and that straight white tooth smile that makes you think either good genes or dental work. His bio also mentioned he worked in biotech and was interested in human potential, which sounded a little vague but kind of impressive. We started chatting and he was very curious. Not flirty, not goofy, curious. Like every message was a question. What do you eat most days? How'd you sleep lately? Any health conditions in the family? He sprinkled in compliments here and there, but mostly it felt like I was filling out a detailed intake form at a new doctor's office. Still, I figured maybe he was just a nerd about wellness. I wasn't creeped out yet. He asked to meet up after a couple days. No drawn-up texting, no weird small talk. I liked that. We met at a juice bar, his idea, and he showed up in all-black athleisure, holding a glass water bottle with some sort of motivational sticker on it. He greeted me with a hug and immediately complimented my posture. Like, not my outfit or hair, my posture. Said I stood like someone who hadn't given up on life. It made me laugh, and I'll admit I was kind of charmed by how weird he was. We sat outside, and he ordered some disgusting-sounding celery turmeric blend. I got something sweeter just to balance out the bitterness of the conversation, because once we started talking, it got intense fast. Jordan didn't really do small talk. He jumped straight into heavy stuff. He asked about my family, like specifically how long my grandparents lived, if there was any history of inflammatory illness, and whether I'd ever broken a bone. When I gave vague answers, he'd press. Not rudely, just like someone who was really, really invested in knowing exactly what kind of human I was. I asked him why he cared so much, and he told me completely casually that he was fascinated by genetics, that his work was partially research-based, and that he couldn't help but apply some of those frameworks to dating. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He was not joking. He said it made sense to assess compatibility on multiple levels. Emotional, physical, genetic, financial. Said most people ignored half the equation and then acted surprised when relationships failed. I nodded, pretending to go along with it, but inside I was like, what? Despite all that, he was actually enjoyable to be around in a weird way. He didn't make dumb jokes, didn't check his phone, didn't brag. He was focused and kind of intense, but he asked good questions and made you feel like you were the only person that existed in that moment. That part was nice. So I saw him again. And again. We started seeing each other maybe once or twice a week. Always daytime dates, always somewhere healthy. Hiking, rock climbing, weird boutique food places that looked like science labs. He'd always order things with chia seeds and spirulina and explain what each ingredient was doing to his body. He was definitely extra, but also oddly consistent. No red flags yet, just a little eccentric. But then the questions got deeper. He asked for my blood type. I told him I wasn't sure, and he looked genuinely disappointed. He asked if I'd ever done a 23andMe or ancestry test. I said, yeah, years ago. He got excited and asked if I still had the raw data. I thought he meant like for fun facts, so I said maybe I'd have to check. He said, I could run it through a couple filters and show you some cool stuff, like immune system markers and behavioral predictors. That was the moment I knew he wasn't just curious. He had a system. I didn't bring it up again for a few days, but it sat in the back of my head. Like, was he dating or evaluating? I started thinking about all the questions he'd asked. None of them were about what I liked, or what made me laugh, or what I cared about. It was always metrics, inputs, history, health. He asked about my dental work, my metabolism, how I reacted to vaccines, what my sleep score was on my fitness tracker. It felt less like someone getting to know me and more like I was being slowly entered into some spreadsheet. One night, I asked him directly, are you making some kind of list? Half joking, but only half. He said, yeah, actually. Not like a literal list of pros and cons, but I do have a system. I rank people I go out with based on a few categories. I asked what kind of categories. He said genetic compatibility, psychological alignment, and lifestyle cohesion. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. I laughed at first, but he didn't. He said he gave people scores, not to judge them, but to be more intentional. He said I ranked higher than most. That I had great sleep discipline and a good emotional regulation profile. I asked how he even judged that. He said, you didn't cry the night you told me about your childhood stuff. That's impressive. Impressive. I felt weird. Not angry, just reduced. Like I'd been doing a performance I didn't know about, and now was getting graded on it. I told him that didn't sit right with me. That wasn't a system to be optimized. That maybe instead of ranking people, he could try knowing them. He said, that's what I'm doing. My way just cuts out the noise. That was our last date. He texted once after that, sent me a screenshot of a podcast episode about evolutionary attraction, and said it reminded him of our conversations. I didn't reply. I kept thinking about how calm he was when he said all that. Like he genuinely believed he'd cracked some dating code. Like he couldn't even see how strange it was to turn people into categories and assign them value based on imaginary points. I wasn't mad that I didn't score a perfect 10. I was mad that there was a score at all. So yeah, that was Jordan. If he ever starts a matchmaking app, delete it immediately. The way I ended up at Megan's family dinner honestly feels like something that would only happen to someone else. You know those stories where you hear it and immediately say, that's insane, but secretly you're glad it didn't happen to you. Yeah, that was this, but it did happen to me. I wish I was making it up, but I swear on every awkward dinner I've ever had, this one takes the cake, or whatever that weird casserole was. Anyway, I matched with Megan on a random Tuesday night while I was half watching a basketball game and debating whether or not to order Thai food. Her profile was all smiles and sun. I don't know how else to describe it. One of those people who looked like they woke up glowing. Photos of her on hikes, holding iced coffee with an aggressively cute dog, and one where she was hugging two older people I later found out were her parents. Her bio said, big family, big heart, always down for good food and better conversation. We started chatting, and she was friendly from the jump. Not in a fake way. She messaged like someone who actually wanted to get to know you, not just kill time before bed. We joked about how half of Tinder felt like people pretending to be cooler than they were. She had this grounded energy to her, like she wasn't trying too hard, which made her stand out. First date was simple, diner food and a walk around the lake. She was super talkative, but not in an annoying way. Just really good at keeping a conversation going. I liked her. She asked questions, remembered my answers, and made fun of me for still listening to CDs in my car. We ended the night hugging in the parking lot, both full of too much pie, and made plans to hang again the next weekend. Over the next 2 weeks, we hung out 3 or 4 more times. Nothing wild. Coffee shops, a farmer's market, one night where we sat in our car eating tacos and reading strangers' license plates. I wouldn't say I was falling hard or anything, but I liked being around her. She had this way of making everyday things feel kind of warm. Then, around the 3rd week, she texted and asked if I wanted to come over for dinner at her parents' place. Said they were hosting their usual Friday night meal, and she thought it would be fun for me to join. I was a little thrown, like meeting the parents already, but she played it down, said they always had extra people over, neighbors, coworkers, whoever was around. She made it sound casual, so I figured why not. She sent me the address and said to come hungry. I showed up that Friday night with a bottle of wine I picked up on the way and immediately felt underdressed. Not in a fancy way, just everyone there looked prepared. Like they knew exactly what kind of vibe this night was gonna be. Megan opened the door all smiles, hugged me, and pulled me into this very well-lit kitchen where her mom was chopping vegetables like a Food Network contestant. Her dad greeted me with a handshake and asked what I did for work before I even took my shoes off. Her younger brother walked past and gave me a once-over. There were name cards on the table. That's when I started to feel weird. There were 6 people at the dinner table: Megan, her parents, her younger brother, her older sister, and me. Megan introduced me like, this is who I've been seeing, and everyone nodded like I was the next contestant on a game show. I sat down and tried to act normal. Dinner was fine at first. Her mom asked polite questions, her dad did the classic let's test his sense of humor thing, and Megan looked proud to have me there. But it was too much. The whole vibe was too focused. They were watching me. Every time I answered a question, someone else would follow up with a comment or a weirdly specific observation. Like I said, I like to cook sometimes, and her sister asked what my go-to spice blend was. Her brother made a joke about how I held my fork. It was subtle, but not that subtle. About halfway through the meal, her mom said, Megan always brings such interesting people to dinner. It's been a fun little tradition these past few months. I smiled, not fully processing what she meant. Megan gave her mom this quick side eye and changed the subject. But my brain locked on that one sentence. Brings such interesting people, plural. As in not just me. Later, her dad said something about last week's guy being from Boston, and I kind of froze. Megan laughed it off like he was misremembering. Said, no, Dad, that was 2 weeks ago. Then she looked at me and added, they mix people up. It's a thing. A thing. After dinner, I helped clear the table while her mom loaded the dishwasher. She leaned over and said, you seem really sweet. Definitely one of the more grounded ones. I didn't know what to do with that sentence. Was that a compliment or a Yelp review? After everything was cleaned up, Megan walked me out. I asked her straight up, was this some kind of test? She got quiet, then admitted that yeah, kind of. That she brought a couple of guys to dinner over the past month or two. Said it wasn't a competition, just something her family enjoyed. It liked meeting the people she dated. It helped her figure things out. She said it was efficient. Efficient. I asked her if she thought any of them found it weird. She said probably, but if someone was right for her, they'd get it. I just kind of nodded, said goodnight, and left. I didn't text her after that. She messaged me once a few days later saying her mom thought I was refreshingly normal, which I guess was supposed to be good. But it just made me feel like I've been unknowingly auditioning for some ongoing sitcom I didn't know I was cast in. I still think about that night sometimes, how fast it went from sweet to scripted. Like maybe I could have laughed it off and kept seeing her, but honestly, I don't want to be part of anyone's Friday night lineup for real. I wasn't even supposed to be on Tinder when I matched with Sophia. I deleted it months before and swore I was done with dating apps. But then I got stuck house sitting for my sister in the middle of nowhere, completely off my routine, no friends around, and nothing but her weird tea collection and slow Wi-Fi to keep me company. So I downloaded it again out of boredom, not out of hope or curiosity, just boredom. Sophia came up about 10 swipes in. Her profile was all black and white pictures, nothing overly posed. She had one photo of her holding a camera, one of her at a rooftop bar mid-laugh, and one where she was facing away from the camera entirely, looking out over a bridge. Her bio was short. Big fan of midnight conversations and overthinking everything. Something about it felt cool without trying too hard. I messaged first and she replied almost instantly. She didn't waste time on what you doing or emojis. She got right into it. Asked good questions, had a weirdly sharp sense of humor, and would randomly send voice notes instead of text just because they feel more real. I found it oddly charming. She seemed like someone who was equal parts mysterious and completely unfiltered. We met up at this little art gallery downtown on a Sunday afternoon. She suggested it, said it was low pressure and full of good exits if things got weird. That should have been a flag, but I laughed and went along with it. She showed up wearing this long brown coat, with paint on one of her sleeves and boots that looked like they'd survived multiple music festivals. She smelled like bergamot and something warm I couldn't place. The date was good. Honestly great. She talked fast, walked even faster, and made fun of half the art in a way that was somehow smart and completely unserious. Afterward, we grabbed coffee and sat in a park until it got cold just talking. She told me she hated small talk but loved stories, so I gave her one of the time I got locked inside a library overnight in college, and she laughed so hard she choked on her drink. We kept seeing each other for a few weeks after that. It didn't feel like we were rushing into anything, but we hung out often enough that I stopped checking the app. She'd send me weird articles, links to songs she said sounded like me, and once mailed me a postcard even though she could just text it. She was thoughtful in a chaotic way. Then suddenly she disappeared. Like full-on ghosted me. I texted her one day about grabbing dinner. Nothing. Waited a day, sent a meme. Still nothing. Tried calling a couple times. Straight to voicemail. I wasn't devastated or anything. We weren't that deep yet, but it definitely messed with my head. One day we're talking about road trips and favorite movie endings, and the next I'm staring at my phone wondering if I hallucinated the whole thing. I moved on eventually. Deleted her number, uninstalled the app again, got busy with work. Life kept moving. I didn't hear from her for months. Then, out of nowhere, months later, I get this message. Hey, really random, but can I ask you something kind of serious? No hello, no apology, no how have you been, just straight into it. I stared at the screen for a good minute before replying. She followed up almost immediately. I might need a character witness. At first, I thought it was a joke, like, haha, I'm trying to convince someone I'm normal, help me out. But she wasn't kidding. She explained, very casually, like it wasn't the weirdest thing in the world, that a guy she used to date was apparently trying to sue her. Emotional damages or something like that. I didn't even know that was a real thing you could do. She said he was accusing her of manipulation. Said she'd lied to him, used him for content, made him feel unsafe emotionally. I was like, what even is that? What kind of content? She told me he found out she'd been keeping voice notes from their conversations. That she used to record things he said because she was working on a personal project. Something about how people open up during early stage dating. Sounded a little too familiar. I asked her point blank, "Were you doing that with me too?" There was a pause. Then she sent a long message. Said yes, sort of. That she hadn't been using the recordings for anything public, not yet. That it was part of the creative process, and that I wasn't being made fun of or anything. She said I was one of the real ones, and that's why she never wrote anything about me. Like that was supposed to make it better. I asked her again why she disappeared. She said she got scared, that I was too kind, too straightforward, and it made her feel guilty. She said she wasn't used to people who didn't come with a bunch of complications. That she didn't know how to keep seeing me without turning it into material. So instead of risking it, she bailed. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't furious, just weirded out. It's a strange thing to learn that someone you were getting to know had been quietly framing you into some internal documentary. Even if they didn't publish it, even if they didn't write a word about you, the idea that your voice was saved somewhere, it makes everything feel scripted in hindsight. She asked again if I'd be willing to talk to her lawyer, just to say she wasn't dangerous or manipulative. That she was complicated, sure, but not cruel. I told her I'd think about it. I never did it. Not because I wanted revenge or anything. I just didn't want to get involved. I didn't want my name in whatever strange mess she was tangled up in. I didn't want to be the guy who once dated the girl who saved your thoughts like souvenirs and pulled them out when she needed something to work on. I already felt like I'd been dragged into a story I didn't agree to be in. I wasn't going to add a courtroom subplot. She thanked me anyway, said she understood, said she hoped I was doing okay. That was the last I heard from her. Sometimes I wonder how many other people she recorded, if they all found out, if they got the same text. Can I ask you something kind of serious, like a warning siren going off way too late? I never got closure, not really. Just the quiet realization that people have all kinds of ways of turning your life into theirs. That sometimes you're just passing through someone else's version of reality, and when they're done with your part, they cut to black. So my girlies told me to find someone online. I chose Tinder. I wasn't even really looking when I matched with Kane. I was in that in-between headspace where you're not trying to fall in love, but also not trying to spend another Friday night eating takeout and scrolling through videos of strangers organizing their closets. I just wanted to meet someone interesting. Someone I could talk to for more than 6 minutes without zoning out. Kane's profile gave off that I read weird books and forget to water my plants vibe. One photo of him in an old band tee, another of him sitting in front of a typewriter like he was trying to bring back the 1940s, and one blurry shot that looked like it had been taken from across the street without him knowing. His bio said, writer, collector of moments, always watching, not in a creepy way, which now that I think about it was foreshadowing I definitely should have taken more seriously. He messaged me first, and it wasn't just hey or what's up, which already made him a rare gem. He asked what movie I'd never admit to loving, and when I told him, he didn't judge me, just said he could tell I had layers. I rolled my eyes but kept talking to him because he was fast with replies, actually funny, and had this laid-back confidence that made him seem more interesting than annoying. We met up that weekend for coffee at a bookstore cafe, because of course we did. He wore this half-buttoned flannel with a beat-up notebook sticking out of his jacket pocket and immediately said something like, I can already tell you're gonna have good lines. I laughed because I thought he meant it as a compliment. I didn't realize he meant it literally. Kane was fun. Different in that chaotic, artsy kind of way. He didn't do the so what he'd do for work. Small talk. He'd ask stuff like, if your younger self met you right now, would they be impressed or disappointed? Or, what's something you believe in but can't prove? It was refreshing, like dating a Reddit thread that wasn't full of weirdos. He always carried that notebook with him. Said he wrote things down so he wouldn't forget them later. Ideas, jokes, random observations. I didn't think it was strange. I mean, who hasn't typed out a random thought in their notes app at 2 a.m.? It just seemed like part of his whole creative writer thing. We hung out a few times after that. Nothing super serious, just movies, bookstores, late-night diner runs. He was one of those guys who didn't believe in making plans more than a few hours ahead. Kind of annoying, But he made up for it with good conversation and random trivia about things like elevator history or how carrots used to be purple. At some point, he mentioned he was writing a screenplay. Said he'd been working on it for months but recently had a breakthrough and was really locking in. He didn't tell me what it was about exactly, just said it was character focus, something raw and honest. I told him that sounded cool and that I wanted to read it someday. He smiled and said, "You already have." I thought he meant metaphorically, like life is the script or whatever. Turns out, nope, he meant literally. It all came out one night when we were at his apartment. He went to grab something from the kitchen and left his laptop open. I wasn't snooping, just killing time, and I noticed a file titled Draft 7. I clicked without thinking, expecting some dramatic monologues or bad dialogue I could secretly roast later. What I found instead was me. Not exactly by name, but close enough. This character was clearly me. Same job, same little stories I'd told him, same exact phrases I'd used, even down to the dumb cereal I said I liked as a kid. She talked like me, made the same jokes, even had the same playlist I'd once sent him. It wasn't inspired by me, it was me. When he came back, I asked about it. Didn't blow up. Just said, "So this girl in your script, is she supposed to be me?" He didn't deny it. Just nodded and said, "Yeah, but like a version of you." Then he added, "You say the best stuff." I couldn't make it up if I tried. I just sat there for a second, not sure if I was supposed to be flattered or creeped out. He didn't see the problem. Said he'd done the same thing with a few other people. Claimed it was how all good writing works. People just don't admit it. I told him there's a difference between being inspired by someone and basically copy-pasting them into a script. He said, "It's not like anyone's gonna know it's you." That's the part that stuck with me. Because yeah, technically, nobody else would know. But I knew. I thought we were just hanging out, getting to know each other. Meanwhile, he was taking mental notes like I was an extra in his next act. I felt less like someone he wanted to date, and more like a puzzle piece he was trying to fit into a story he'd already decided how to end. I left pretty quickly after that, no drama. Just said I wasn't cool with it and didn't want to keep being part of something I didn't sign up for. He didn't argue. Just said, "Okay, I'll probably write about this too." I didn't answer. And honestly, I don't think he meant any harm. I don't think he was trying to be manipulative. I think he just doesn't know how to separate people from material. Like every interaction is just raw footage to him. Some people journal, he scripts. Kane's probably out there somewhere still filling notebooks with bits of strangers, building a world made out of borrowed stories. Maybe someday I'll see his movie, and maybe I'll recognize the girl in it. She'll probably say something funny I once said while waiting for a latte. And I'll cringe a little. This one starts at a bar trivia night I wasn't even supposed to be at. My friend had bailed last minute, and I was already halfway there, so I figured screw it. I'll just go alone and hope someone has an open seat. I ended up on a team with a random group of people, and one of them was Bobbert. Yep, Bobert. Not Robert, not Raw. Bobbert. He said it was a family nickname that just stuck, which I never totally bought, but I went along with it because he seemed chill and a little too proud of being called something that sounded like a typo. He wasn't my usual type. Tall shirt with one of those buzz cuts that could either mean military background or just a bad breakup. Glasses. Flannel shirt that looked like it had never been buttoned all the way in its life. But he was surprisingly easy to talk to. We ended up carrying the whole trivia team with our shared, completely unnecessary knowledge of early 2000s reality TV. And after a few rounds of drinks, we exchanged numbers. He was funny, a little awkward in an intentional way, and didn't seem like he was trying to impress me. Our first actual hangout was at this tea place that looked like it hadn't updated its decor since 2007. It had couches that swallowed you whole and weird wallpaper with faded sunflowers. I loved it immediately. He showed up with a tote bag full of books he said he was cycling through, and one of them was literally just titled Trauma and You. I remember joking light reading, and he grinned like I'd passed some kind of test. Maubert was a good listener. That was his thing. The kind of guy who didn't just nod along, but actually absorbed what you were saying. He remembered weird details like that my favorite snack was peanut butter pretzels or that I hated the word moist even when it was used correctly. We talked for hours about deep stuff. Childhood, therapy, exes, fear of ending up boring. He was really open about his own life too. Told me about his panic attacks in college, the family drama he used to avoid but was now trying to face head on, and how he felt like most men were afraid of emotional honesty. At first, I found it refreshing. Most guys I've dated barely scraped the surface. This one was swimming in it. At the time, I thought maybe I had finally met someone who got it. And for a little while, it was really good. We hung out a lot, made weird playlists together, went on long walks without any real destination, had serious conversations over gas station snacks in his car. I told him things I didn't usually tell people that early on. It just felt safe. Then came the podcast. He'd mentioned it in passing before, said he co-hosted something with a friend, called it a little side project. I figured it was about music or pop culture or whatever, because that's what everyone's podcast is about. I'd never really thought to look it up, until one day I did. I was lying in bed scrolling, and I searched his name just out of curiosity. Took me maybe 2 minutes to find it. The podcast was called Modern Vulnerability, and the tagline was Real Stories, Raw Emotions, and the Modern Man's Emotional Evolution. That should have been my first red flag. I clicked on the most recent episode and froze within 5 minutes. He was talking about me. Not by name, but definitely me. The story he told was framed as a recent connection. He described a woman he was seeing who had walls disguised as jokes and an aversion to stillness. Then he recited a thing I had said to him while we were laying in his living room a week before, word for word. It wasn't cruel. He wasn't mocking me or trying to expose me, but he was analyzing me, breaking me down like a therapist with a microphone, talking about how I struggled with intimacy despite craving it, and how I held pain like it was a badge. I just sat there, staring at the wall, hearing my own words repeated like I was some character in a case study. I listened to 2 more episodes after that and found bits of other people, some clearly old friends, some past flings, maybe even exes, all casually woven into his little emotional tapestry. He never used names, but it didn't matter. It wasn't anonymized. It was just hidden in plain sight. I didn't confront him immediately. I just needed a minute to even process it. Well, I did bring it up over text because I wasn't about to get deep in person again. He replied like I was overthinking. Said he never used my name, that it wasn't about me, it was about themes. He said it was how he processed, and that it helped other people relate to their own emotions. I told him it felt gross, that I didn't sign up to be emotional content for his audience. He said, "You told me you felt safe talking to me. I thought that meant you trusted how I'd hold your story. Like that somehow made it okay." I said there's a huge difference between sharing with someone and being shared by someone. He sent me a voice note about how hard it is to be a man who's emotionally aware in a world that mocks that. I deleted it before listening. After that, I stopped replying. He followed up a few days later with some long-winded text about boundaries being a learning process, but I didn't answer. I didn't feel angry exactly, just disappointed. Because it wasn't that he shared my trauma or aired dirty laundry. It's that he turned real human moments, mine and his and other people's, into content. Sometimes I think about how he probably framed that too. The silence, the way I stopped responding. Maybe it became another lesson on the podcast, another paragraph in his monologue about emotional growth. I don't want to know. That was Bobbert, the guy who made vulnerability his brand and forgot that actual people were part of the process. Basically, you know that moment when someone seems too perfect, and you just go with it because, for once, you're tired of being skeptical. That was Annie. I met her during this weird streak where every girl I matched with either had a spiritual crystal collection or was trying to get me into crypto. Annie was neither. Her bio said something like organized but not uptight, sarcastic in 3 languages, allergic to boring conversations. I remember thinking, okay, finally, someone who doesn't sound like she's going to make me meditate or pitch a startup in the first 10 minutes. We matched on a Monday and started talking that night. She was sharp, not just clever, but fast. Our conversation felt like tennis. She had hit back with something better every time. I said something dumb about being a night owl, and she responded with a full theory about nocturnal productivity that somehow also roasted my sleep schedule. It was fun. She kept me on my toes. We made plans to meet up that Friday. She picked the spot, a rooftop bar I'd never been to but immediately liked. It was one of those places with string lights, a solid playlist, and drinks that cost way too much, but taste like someone actually tried. She showed up in a black jacket, perfect jeans, and these boots that looked like she could walk through a blizzard without flinching. First date was easy. No awkward pauses, no fake laughing. She was direct but not cold and asked good questions. Nothing surface level. She wanted to know about the stuff in between, like what my actual day looked like, or what I'd be doing if Red didn't exist. She told me about her job in some sort of operations role for a logistics company, but said her real skill was making messes manageable. I joked that she sounded like a crisis manager for adult lives, and she smiled and said, basically. We kept seeing each other. Once turned into twice, twice turned into a regular thing. We were both busy people, but she always made time. She had this hyper-scheduled life, but she never made me feel like I was slotted into a calendar out of obligation. She was thoughtful, too, remembered what I liked on my bagel, brought over snacks I'd casually mentioned liking once, always showed up 5 minutes early. After a few weeks, I realized something kind of odd. I knew almost nothing about her outside the time we spent together. She asked a ton of questions, but rarely gave more than a surface-level answer about herself. I knew her job, her favorite wine, her go-to takeout place, but not much else. I chalked it up to her being private. Some people are slow to open up right. Then stuff started feeling weird. We were out grabbing dinner, and she mentioned something super specific about my college major, something I was almost sure I hadn't told her. I kind of brushed past it, but then she brought up a podcast I used to post about back in 2019. Again, I'd never mentioned it to her. She laughed it off like it was just good memory, but I started wondering. Later that night, when I went to the bathroom, she left her laptop open on the couch. I wasn't snooping, but when I came back, I saw a document with my full name on it. Not just first name, full name. It was a Word doc, titled Tyler, preliminary, yes, my name's Tyler. I sat down slowly, acting like I hadn't seen anything, and made it through the rest of the night trying to be normal. But my head was spinning. What the hell did preliminary mean? The next day, I couldn't let go. I texted her and casually asked if she'd Google me before we started dating. She replied, of course I did. Don't you? I said maybe a little, like checking socials. She replied with a laughing emoji and said, I'd just like to know who I'm dealing with. A few days later, I brought it up again in person. Straight up asked what that document on her computer was. She didn't deny it. Said she made reference notes for people she dated. That it helped her remember things, like a personal CRM system. I asked if she did this for everyone she dated. She nodded. Said it started as a way to stay safe. Background checks, quick Google searches. But then it evolved into a system. She had documents on past dates, matches, even people she never met but chatted with for a while. Apparently, she liked patterns. She tracked stuff like hobbies, phrases people used, how fast they texted back, whether they over-apologized or avoided questions. She said it helped her screen for red flags. She had a spreadsheet, too. I didn't freak out exactly, but I asked her if she saw people as data or actual people. She looked at me like I didn't get it. Said, you can be both. People are data. But that doesn't mean I don't care about them. The most surreal part was how casual she was about it. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't trying to hide it. In her mind, this was just smart dating. Efficient. She said she'd been burned in the past, catfished, ghosted, lied to. So she adapted, got organized. She showed me her files. Not all of them, but enough. Mine included screenshots of our first messages, notes on the way I talked, bullet points from things I'd said during dates. There were even guesses, like probably not super close with dad, and may have anxious attachment style. I didn't even know how to respond. I asked if she'd ever shared this stuff with anyone. She swore she hadn't, said it was private. Said it wasn't about judging, it was about clarity. I left that night feeling like I'd been through an interview I never agreed to. I wasn't angry. Not really. Just kind of uncomfortable. I get wanting to be cautious. I get wanting to be smart. But there's a point where protecting yourself turns into dissecting people. And I didn't want to be someone's project folder. She texted me a few times after that. Nothing pushy. Just casual check-ins. A meme, a hope you're good. I didn't block her. I didn't ghost. I just stopped responding. Quietly stepped out of the folder. I still think about it sometimes. How many files she has. How many people won't even know they've been labeled, tagged, and filed away in some color-coded Google Drive labeled Dating 2025. I wonder if I made it to the potential category, or if I was downgraded after asking too many questions. This is one of those stories that sounds fake when I tell it out loud, like the kind of thing people say that would never happen until it does. And you're the one sitting there at a vegan brunch with your fork halfway to your mouth, realizing you've been dating a married guy named King. Yes, that was his real name, or at least the one he used. And no, I didn't see it coming. I wasn't even really trying to date at the time. I just wanted a distraction. I'd gone through a string of boring matches and was back on Tinder with the enthusiasm of someone scrolling out of habit. I didn't want a boyfriend. I wanted someone fun to text after work, someone who could hold a conversation that didn't feel like interviewing a sleep-deprived intern. That's it. King, he had that vibe. Confident without being too much. Funny without trying hard. His pictures were basic. Clean hoodie, coffee in hand, one photo of the dog he claimed wasn't his but liked him better than her actual owner, which I now realized was probably more true than I thought. We started messaging and it clicked right away. His responses were fast, thoughtful, always had some kind of twist to them. You know those people who somehow manage to text with perfect rhythm? That was him. It felt like talking to someone who already knew your sense of humor but didn't make it weird. Our first date was just drinks at this loud rooftop bar where the music was too high and the lighting made everyone look 10% better. He showed up in a brown jacket, dark jeans, and clean sneakers. The kind of look that doesn't scream for attention but still says, I tried. I appreciated that. He gave me a hug right away and said something about how I looked exactly like my photos, but happier. It was cheesy, but it worked. He asked me questions all night, and I noticed pretty quickly that he was insanely good at making me talk about myself. Like, almost too good. At one point, I was deep into a story about a failed high school talent show performance and realized I'd been talking for nearly 20 minutes straight. He was just there, nodding, laughing in the right places, sipping his drink slowly like he had nowhere else to be. We went out again a few days later and again the next week. He always picked interesting spots, bookstore cafes, obscure food trucks, this random film night at a community center where we watched a documentary about bees. Every time it felt like he wanted to show me something new. He remembered what I liked, brought me a book he said I'd mentioned walking in passing, even started texting me pictures of weird bumper stickers just because he knew I'd laugh at them. So yeah, I was into it. I wasn't planning on catching feelings, but they started showing up anyway. It felt easy and consistent and kind of rare. He never did the ghosting thing. Never made plans and bailed. He texted good mornings and shared playlists, and once stayed on the phone with me for 2 hours while I tried to fix my router. It was the kind of connection that sneaks up on you. Until it didn't. One Saturday, we made plans to get brunch in this part of town he'd suggested. Said it was one of his favorites. He picked the spot, told me he'd already made a reservation under his name, which felt oddly formal for him, but whatever. I showed up a few minutes early and gave his name at the host stand. The guy looked at the book, then back at me and said, King and Lena. I blinked. No, just King. He shrugged. Oh, yeah, they checked in already. You can head back, they're seated near the back window. I was confused, thinking maybe it was a mistake, but I walked through the maze of tiny tables and string lights, expecting to see King sitting alone, maybe with a coffee already in hand. Instead, I saw him seated across from a woman. She had her back to me, but I saw his face, calm, animated, like he was in the middle of telling a story. He was holding her hand across the table. My stomach dropped. I stood there for a second, frozen like an idiot. And he looked up. And that moment, that split second where he recognized me and didn't flinch, that told me everything. I turned around and left before he could say anything. I practically jogged out of the restaurant, got in my car, and just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel like what the actual hell just happened. He texted me that night. No apology. Just, I didn't want you to find out like that. I ignored him. Then a few hours later, another text. It's not what you think. I want to explain. I didn't reply until the next morning. I asked him straight up, are you married? He wrote back technically yes, but it's not what it seems. Classic. Turns out King was part of some group he called a reformist community, which sounded like a cult but with better branding. He said they didn't believe in traditional labels, that marriage didn't mean the same thing to them, and that relationships were fluid. He said his wife knew he was dating, that she was too, that it wasn't betrayal, just part of how they lived. I asked why he didn't just tell me from the start. He said most people don't understand it, and he wanted me to get to know him first. He thought if I saw who he really was, I'd maybe be more open to it. I told him what he really was, deceptive. He said he never lied, which was technically true. He just didn't say anything until I was already in it. I blocked him after that. Goodbye, Numpty.